This is Creating a Family. Talk about foster, adoptive, and kinship care. Welcome back to our regular listeners. We wouldn't be here without you, so thank you. And a special welcome to the new folks who have just found us. We're very glad to have you here. I'm Dawn Davenport. I am the host of this podcast, as well as the director of the nonprofit creatingafamily.org. Today, we're doing a re-air of truly one of my favorite shows we have done in the almost 17 years we have been doing this podcast. And that is an interview we did with the late, great Dr. Karyn Purvis on raising and healing abused and neglected kids. Dr. Purvis was the director and co-founder of the Karyn Purvis Institute of Child Development at Texas Christian University. She was also the co-creator of Trust-Based Relational Intervention. She was the co-author of a best-selling book in the adoption area. And really, she was so passionate and such an advocate for children. She was a friend of the Creating a Family podcast. We interviewed her, I actually don't know how many times over the years, but she celebrated our 1 millionth listener celebration. She was the guest for that show, and it was just 3 months before she passed away in 2015. This is a wonderful interview with a wonderful woman. I hope you enjoy it as much as I have. Welcome back to Creating a Family, Dr. Karyn Purvis.
Thank you so much. It is wonderful to be with you again, Dawn.
I neglected to mention that part of our 1 million listen celebration is having special guests, and you are our first special guest, and we love it when you come. I thoroughly enjoy talking with you, and your wisdom has just been a huge asset to pre- and post-adoptive families in our large online community. Let me ask a quick question, though, before we jump in. I know you've been having some significant health problems, and we had a number of people who wanted to know, how are you doing now?
Do you know, I'm doing really well. I was diagnosed with the return of cancer about a year ago. Been doing treatment. You know, it's a sweet thing. All of my needs have been met lavishly, and I'm doing great.
You are blessed, and I'm so glad to hear that. All right, jumping right in. And I'm going to start with a really general question that just will kind of get the ball rolling. It's general, but it also, I think, gets to the heart of what some people struggle with when they're thinking about changing their parenting style. Why is parenting kids who have been abused or neglected different from traditional parenting? Or why should it be? Maybe that's the better way to say it.
That's a good way to put it, Dawn. You know, that for a child who had a protected pregnancy and a protected life, it's easy to make connections, and it's easy for them to understand our intentions. And they have a background of trust. And so if we do something wrong, and all parents do, it's just part of being human, the child is able to forgive us and still trust us. For a child coming from hard places who may have had stress from the uterus and may have had profound neglect or harm, they don't have the capacity to trust because they've never learned it. And we have to have parenting strategies that don't re-traumatize children, and that is very, very different from a child who's never been harmed.
And that's the crux of everything that you teach. Well, I'm going to go ahead and read a question from one of our audience. We've got quite a few, and this one actually kind of just made me smile. She says, we will be traveling to China to get our 7-year-old next month. What are the 3 most important things I should do the first 6 months home? This is a woman after my own heart. I love that. You know, okay, tell me 3 things.
Yes.
Tell me 6 months.
Yes.
She's defining it for you there.
So let me start with the first 6 minutes. If she hasn't met him before, lower yourself to his height. Look into his eyes. Don't get too close, as though you were familiar. Depending on what kind of care he's had, it might frighten him. I would say learn a few sentences or a few words to use in that first few minutes. Look into his eyes gently, but if he looks away, you look away too, and then come back to his eyes in a minute, and then look away when he looks away. He's telling you it's too much. How we say hello And maybe hello is all she needs to learn in Chinese. But how we say hello has a lot of power in setting the bar for where we'll go from there. Matter of fact, there's one research study, you may be familiar with it, Dawn, that shows that there's a spiral that starts either up or down at the point of the meeting. So what we want to do is be, for the first 6 minutes, the first 3 months, the first 6 months, I want to be giving a child his voice. Now, that's going to be a little tricky because he's going to come with a different language. So how are you going to do that? What's your plan? Do you have 3x5 cards with some important words and pictures so y'all can communicate? Are you going to bring a translator into the home the first few weeks? Remember, how he settles in will make a lot of difference in the long-term transition.
I know that some people feel like that having a translator slows down the child learning English. Do you agree with that?
Do you know, I would say as a trauma exploration that everything I can do to help that child know he is safe with me very quickly is going to help him for the rest of his life. So, matter of fact, I'm working on a book for foster parents right now. And in the first, when I open the screen door and the social worker drops a child at my door, what do I need to be doing? How do I do the entrance into the home? How do I do the first night in my home? How do I do the first trip to the grocery store? Remember that your child's brain development is very, very, very young. Matter of fact, research suggests that it is 40% of his developmental age. I treat all children, if they're 17, if they're 19, if they're 4, as though they had large fear. So, giving him a voice, even it's going to be a limited voice, but if it's pointing, if it's grunting, you acknowledge his words, because coming from an orphanage, no one acknowledged his words, most likely. Make sure he has choices that also gives him a voice. When he's able to speak well enough to say, I'm not wearing that coat, you're not really my mother, and you can't tell me what to do. And most kids will try some different variations of survival strategies. And you're just going to say something that gives him voice, like, oh, buddy, if you're asking for a compromise, use some good words, because I'm listening and I want to help. So I would say disarming fear is your big job.
I really appreciated what you said about the entrance to the home. Now, in this case, she's going to be meeting a child in China, but assuming that somebody is adopting from foster care, so they have a child, they're adopting a child, or
Yes.
fostering a child. Now, some of these very same things would apply, the making eye contact,
Yes.
but respect the child when
Yes.
the child looks away. So some of the same things would apply. What are some additional things, however, that you would add for children who are being either fostered and, as you say, the moment they enter the home? What can we do to make certain our home is perceived as a safe place?
Exactly. No, I love that question, Dawn. It's dear to my heart. But I would say if you have warning that CPS is bringing you a foster child, or the first time your adopted child enters your home, I used to love to keep cookie dough, cold cookie dough in the fridge. And before my boys came in from the school, just about 10 minutes before, I'd put about a dozen cookies in the oven. So if you have enough time and you can keep a little batch of cookie dough, put some cookies. When you open the door, they get a whiff of safety, because warm cookies is a message of safety. And you need to know that smell goes straight to the amygdala, which is the fight, flight, or freeze region. So if there's a pleasant smell, or even an infuser with something running, you might have that in the home. But here's the most important piece. That's the human piece. Most of the time, a caseworker drops the child off. The child has to sit for 30 to 45 minutes while paperwork is done. So you set it up with your caseworker ahead of time. When you first come, I need 30 minutes. And so when that child comes to your door, you lean down, not in too loud a voice, it'll frighten, but in a warm, mellow voice, and you make gentle eye contact respectfully. And you say, sweetie, I'm Miss Karyn, and I'm so glad you're here. And you say, I would like to show you my house. Can I show you my house? Now, you think that may be silly, but here's the child walking into a house. He doesn't know what jumps out from where, right? He doesn't know what's in the closets. And I would say to the child, sweetie, do you want to hold my hand or do you just want to walk beside me? I've given him a choice already. He's in my door 10 seconds and I've given him a voice. And I would take him through the house and I would say, this is Tommy's room and he stays here with his little brother. And if a child wants to look under the beds, if a child wants to look in the closets, my embarrassment about what my closets look like, disarm that child's fear. And then when he's settled in, you can say, do you want to sit here and have some cookies and color? Or do you want to sit here and watch a cartoon beside me while I talk to the caseworker, right? So I've made him my priority because I know that for the child coming from a hard place, the brain parts for survival are on fire, and I have to calm them. And he will make fast gains in my home when I calm fear and build trust.
Oh, that's beautiful. Okay, excellent. The hard part is that sometimes we don't have notice. But even without notice, you could directly speak to the caseworker and say, I need you to give me some time here, and then I'll be right back with you.
If you are a regular listener, you have heard us talk about Jockey Being Family and their support for free courses that we offer for you. You can find these free courses at bit.ly/JBF support. The Jockey Being Family Foundation has supported us offering these free courses for many years. They are excellent courses. You can use them for continuing education if you need continuing ed. But even if you don't, it can help you improve your parenting. So check it out and tell a friend.
All right. We have a question from Sarah. She said, we adopted 2 siblings 2.5 years ago. They are currently 9 and 7. I am struggling with how to discipline them. The 7-year-old in particular can be very defiant. I want to establish attachment and connection, but her poor behavior is making life miserable for our whole family. How can we discipline and keep connected? I particularly appreciated her last sentence there because I think this is a challenge for many. In fact, I know it is. At Creating a Family, we have a very large online support group, and this is a question that we get over and over and over again from families and parents who are struggling with how do we discipline, because discipline is important, but on the same time, we know that these children have been hurt, and we know that they're frightened, and we know that some of their behavior problems are coming from their prior life experiences, but we still have to make progress.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So this is a question that we're asked most often. Now, I don't know if you're aware, Dawn, that our trust-based relational intervention has achieved evidence-based status, okay? That means that we've published a lot of research about how quickly kids can heal, okay? When we talk about behavioral change, every level of behavioral change at every level of risk gives this child a voice, okay? So at the first level, the child has been playing and all of a sudden they're mouthy. And they might say, I want a snack. And your biggest job as parents or as caregivers is to catch it at that level when you can. So that means stay close, simplify your life, stay near where the children are. And then when they say something, you say, whoa. So like for playful engagement, which is the first level, nobody's in danger. My response is something like, whoa, you want to try it with respect? Or are you asking or telling? Or something playful that nudges the child back online. Now, at the second level, maybe the child's a little more persistent. So let me point out this. At level 1, when I say, are you asking or you telling, I'm giving the child a voice, but showing him how to use it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. It does.
So at level 2, the child might be more persistent. Maybe I'll do something like, I'm not wearing my coat. Buddy, if you're asking for a compromise, then you need to use your good words because I'm listening. Now, again, I'm giving him a voice. Tell me what you need, and I will work with all my power to meet your need. But we need good words, okay? Now, at the level 1, it takes about a minute or less to nudge the little guy back online, right, under my wing, where he's going to learn. That's where he's going to be safe, tucked under my wing. It takes about a minute to do it there. At structured engagement, maybe I offer choices or maybe I offer a compromise. In both cases, again, I'm giving voice. That might take me 5 minutes if it's a little more persistent. Maybe not. At level 3, We call it calming engagement, and that's where a child starts to get wired, and they're going to be out of control at level 4 if I don't do something to stop it. So I'm going to help the child. I'm going to do one of two things, or one of many things, but kind of two categories. On the one category, I might do a traditional think it over, never a time out. We don't send the children away from us. We say, I'm here to help you succeed. We don't talk like that to each other. I want you to sit right here at the kitchen table while I do the dishes. And when you're ready to tell me what you did wrong and how you can do it right, say ready and I'll come. Again, when they say ready and we go to them, they will use their words and tell us what they did wrong, how they could. So, baby, how could you get your need met without hitting your sister? Well, I wanted the puzzle piece. How could you get it without hitting? Well, I could have used my words. Do you want to go try that now? And you let them practice using their words, right? Now, we've had kids who are violent, who the wheels are off or coming off. And sometimes it will take containment. You only have to be specially trained. There's probably a 2 or 3 day training before you ever do this, because this is dangerous. But when the child is calm again, we hold their hands and we look into their eyes and we say, baby, can you tell me what you need? Because violence is the language of a child who doesn't have words.
Yes, say that again.
So,
that's important.
Violence is the language of a child who doesn't have words. Mm-hmm. The voice is so powerful. And they should have learned from a loving mother and daddy at birth that when they called, somebody came. But for our children, they called and no one came, or they cried and they called for the offender to stop hurting them, but the offender liked their cries and hurt them worse. So they have no trust in their words. We have to teach them. See, here's what I say in brief about us. We take away violence, manipulation, triangulation, and control by giving voice. That is not okay, buddy. You do not say, you're going to kill me. You take a breath and give me words I can understand. Because if it's in my power, I'm going to move heaven and earth, and I'm going to meet your need, but I need words I can understand.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Excellent. I will tell you a funny story about the Think It Over, and one of my kids, we had a chair. It was a Think It Over chair. And he figured out the system very quickly, and before his little bottom hit the chair, he had already thought it over. He assured me, knew exactly what he did wrong, and could spit it out. This is what I did wrong. This is what I'll do next time, and this is how I'll make it up to whoever I hurt. And finally I said, I don't think you've thought long enough. No, Mom, I really have. I've got it all here. No, think longer. You're going to think a lot
they are so clever. If I continue to give him words, right? And I do think it's okay to say, you know what, you were pretty accelerated or you're pretty worked up. So I think I'll just sit here beside you and we'll deep breathe for 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. And then just sit in silence beside him and breathe, right?
Mm-hmm. Here's a question from Renee. She's saying, my son, adopted at 2.5, is now 5. He seems constitutionally incapable of accepting limits in the word no. I'm talking epic meltdowns and tantrums. It's wearing me out, and I'm out of ideas of how to help him. Part of life for adults, and certainly a part of life for children, is being told that they can't do something. Do you have any specific suggestions for a child who tantrums and screams, yells, or does whatever in order to get his way, or to get over the word no, or to be allowed to do what he wants to do?
Yeah, I do. Absolutely do. So let me tell you that what we know about trauma now is that the limbic system and the amygdala, which are fight, flight, and freeze systems in the brain, are hyperactivated, but the prefrontal cortex, which is where you have reasoning and logic and executive functioning and planning, this is where your personality is, this is where you understand the consequences of your behaviors. So in a loving home with a protected pregnancy, that part of the brain takes 20 years to mature. As anybody teaching a 6-year-old to drive will be able to tell you, right? But
or parenting
that part of the brain, yeah, really. But that part of the brain's offline. So here's what we would do. It's called the sandwich technique. So think about a drug commercial. They're trying to give us drugs without scaring us to death, right? And so they start out with the rainbow and the little birds tweeting, and there's this drug, and it's going to bring up serotonin. It's going to help you not be depressed. Although there are some side effects, and some of them are pretty serious, but then you go back to the rainbow, right? And the birds. So we call it a sandwich technique. So, sweetie, I know that you really love to do that. That's the outside of the cookie, right? But right now I have to fix dinner. That's the middle that's gushy that he doesn't want to hear. But let's see if we can make a plan for when we can do that. Okay. Now, here's what I want to say about a child that's wearing a family out. There is a heuristic or a rule of thumb. If the behavior, so all children tantrum, all children lie, all children fuss, all children are aggressive with their peers sometimes. But for the child from a hard place, and particularly those who have fetal alcohol exposure, and the national statistic is that 80% of children adopted domestically need parents that understand fetal alcohol, drugs or alcohol, and children coming internationally. Now, there's plenty to do. And you could find a lot of that in our work. So here's what I would say. If the behaviors have more intensity, more frequency, and more duration, then your child needs mentoring and teaching that has those same three features. So where a child who doesn't have inability to get to his prefrontal cortex because of fear, that's going to take me pouring many, many hours into him close under my wing. Now, I'm going to say yes every time I can. Sometimes I have to say no. So I might say yes, I might say yes, I might say yes. I might say, how about after dinner, but yes. Or yes, but how about after dinner? Because that limbic system is just looking to get survival needs met. But I'm going to have to say a lot of yeses. We have dear friends, Michael and Amy Monroe, that have the Empowered to Connect ministry. And they say to parents that they train, take one Saturday and see if all day long you can say yes. I mean, not if the cat's going in the microwave, mind you, but everything that's possible to say yes to, that you say yes to. And what we find for parents of, let's say you have a low-risk child, low-risk pregnancy, your child is born, you say yes every time he cries. Yes, I will feed you. Yes, I will hold you. Yes, I will rock you. Yes, I will cradle you. Yes, I will warm you. We don't get that with our children from hard places. They come to our door with these survival skills because they didn't have a voice. And with those survival skills, we have to say our first no inside of 5 minutes at our door. Right? So I have to be creative to find ways to say yes.
And, sometimes when you're worn out, and parenting children from hard places is tiring. And sometimes when we're worn out, we as parents fall into the habit of just saying no because we just want to break, and so sometimes we have to be retrained, which is, I think, what the pros are getting at.
Well, and there's this notion, and I think it's a logical notion. He gets out of control so easy, I have to just keep the hammer down all the time.
Right.
Because if I let the hammer up just an inch, he's going to run me down, And if you take that analogy out of what we've heard from some parenting strategies and parenting books, just keep the hammer down, keep a tight thumb. If you think about the way the brain matures with exercise, right? So I teach my child to use their words through exercise. So can you imagine the football coach who says to the star quarterback, you're doing really miserable at this practice. I want you just to not practice anymore. Would you show up for the game? I mean, you're never going to hear that.
Right.
You're going to hear, you're going to practice some more. Well, practice some more with our child is not a drill. I'm not a drill sergeant. It is, I am the coach. I am the mentor. But here's again the thing. Catch these things low. Because if I catch them at a level 1, it's a minute solution. If I catch them at a level 4, it's probably an hour or more.
Yeah, or more. Yeah, at times.
If you are involved with foster parent, kinship parent, adoptive parent support group, or if you're involved with training foster, adoptive, or kinship parents, you need to know about Creating a Family's interactive training and support curriculum for foster, adoptive, and kinship families. It is a wonderful resource. We have a library of 25 curriculum. Each curriculum comes with a video, a facilitator guide, a handout specific to that topic, and an additional resource sheet. The topics are directly relevant to parenting, foster, adoptive, and kinship families. You could check it out at parentsupportgroups.org. That's parentsupportgroups.org.
Dr. Purvis, I want to go back to, I was curious about the statistic that it doesn't surprise me at all, but I wanted to go back. You said 80% of kids adopted domestically. Were you saying have been exposed to alcohol in utero?
Alcohol or drugs, yes.
And is that a foster care or is that domestic infant or both?
That is foster care affirmed statistic. It is probably not unlike private adoptions. The number 80% is confirmed at the national level. And
that's for foster care.
Texas, that's for foster care. But for children coming, there are times where there's just a woman who can't manage the child, who doesn't know what to do with the child. She's got too many or she's too poor or whatever that is. So there may be children coming that are not exposed to substance, although I would suspect many of them were a high percentage. But the stress to the human brain has a similar effect. Can I give you one or two things that everybody bringing home a child under 3 should be thinking about? Is that okay?
Yes.
If you have studied any of the research of Dr. Tiffany Field, she had a prematurely born child. She didn't know what to do. She was helpless. Her little one didn't gain weight very fast. And she realized that when she touched her, she was more animated. And she actually developed something called the infant massage. And if you bring home a child, and I have just recently worked with a little boy that came from hard places at birth, family got him at birth, okay, but he was exposed. And every 2 hours after they brought him home, they did this infant massage. The touch calms the central nervous system. It makes new synapses in the brain. It brings down the excitatory brain chemistry, brings up the healthy chemistry. If you haven't had a chance to do that, you didn't know to do that with a little one, you can do something very powerful, very similar, and that is called a Wilbarger brushing protocol, because every time you stroke, you have to be trained. It takes about 30 minutes with an OT, but every time you stroke, you actually change the brain chemistry. Every time you stroke, you actually change the capacity of the brain because new synaptic connections are forming in the brain every time you touch. And what that will do is a tremendous amount of nurturing and mending to the brain that was harmed by either stress. I mean, Dawn, think about, there's hardly a circumstance where a child has become available to foster or to adopt where there wasn't loss and trauma.
Yeah, we say that about international adoption, too. It used to be people assumed that when they adopted internationally, they were getting children who had not experienced abuse, neglect, and loss. But the reality is children enter state care the world over for almost always the same reason.
And if we understand trauma, we will give our children some common denominators. We'll give them us in large quantity. When you bring a child home, don't rush them off to school. Don't rush them off to daycare. Spend some time. Let them know what a mommy is. Let them know what a kitchen is. Let them know what a papa is. Work with them during that time on using their words and proving to them through your actions. You should probably give a minimum of 7 yeses to 1 no. Okay? Become the playmate. Become the ally. Become the advocate. So children coming from hard places, because they have changes in their brain chemistry and their insulin receptor sites from trauma, they're going to be hungry. So if they go 2 hours, we ask parents to keep a journal or a sheet on the fridge for the first number of weeks till they get into a habit. Food every 2 hours, because when our children get a little bit hungry, they melt down. Hydration, because one of the chemicals for dehydrated children coming from hard places are typically chronically dehydrated from lack of care. And they have a chemical in their brain that causes more behaviors called glutamate. a physical activity, a sensory activity every 2 hours. I would recommend to everybody that brings a child from a hard place to get a book on sensory processing, because if a child has high levels of sensory stuff and they're at the school cafeteria and the child next to them opens a tuna fish sandwich, the child I serve is going to have a meltdown because that smell went straight to his amygdala, and instead of being calmed by a sweet scent, he's alerted and he's upset, and he'll typically get sent to the principal's office. So think about a newborn in arms. I'm going to feed him every 2 hours because I'm holding him. That's a sensory activity. So I'm going to play games or do sensory activities with a child. I'm going to hydrate them. And I'm going to give them me, all of me, my eyes. I'm going to look gently into their face. I'm going to start watching their pupil dilation. I'm going to start watching when they breathe shallow. I know they're fearful. They've been afraid so long they can't tell you they're afraid. They don't even know it. But you can see the physiological signs.
How long do you recommend that parents or one parent stay home with the child after an adoption?
Well, now you're going to have to do a little bit of legwork with the school. I haven't found a school that wasn't willing to come in once a week or twice a week. But if you don't have to, the prefrontal cortex is not online. So really you're hammering a system when you worry about academics. You're hammering a system that's offline.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I actually meant parents staying home from work, but
yes,
but you're answering another question. That's a good one.
Yes, I'm answering a part of that same question.
Okay, gotcha.
If I could, I would stay an absolute positive minimum of 6 weeks if it was possible for my husband and I to trade off and take our vacation time. We've had teachers whose teachers gave them time of their vacation days, and they stayed home months, 4 months. Remember that you're setting the course for the rest of your life with this child in those early hours, those early days, those early weeks.
So would it be fair to say as long as you can, having one parent be home?
Yes. Yes, but now let me qualify it. It's not that you're on the phone or the computer and he's at the house. It's that you are with. It's not near, it's not around, it's not close, it's with.
Yeah, not playing Candy Crush on your phone or,
That's right. That's
texting
right.
or putting things. We have a question from an adult adoptee. She says, I've seen before where you, Dr. Purvis, say that adoptive parents become the biological parents through connection. We change their biology. So the adult adoptee is asking this question. She says, I've seen adoptive parents now call themselves biological parents because of that statement. I wonder if it isn't important for adoptive parents to accept that they aren't the child's biological parent. Does their lack of acceptance affect how the child adjusts and reacts?
You know, that's actually a Daniel Siegel quote, and sometimes when I have used it in the past, I forgot to cite him, so it's actually not mine, but his. But here's what I will tell you. I didn't realize the grief that would cause, because you know what? If you came into a home where there wasn't a nurturing parent, maybe a parent who had issues and wasn't able to meet your needs, it's an unkind thing to have said on my part. I don't even use it anymore. I don't even say it anymore. It is still going to be possible for an adult adoptee who's come into possibly what is not a nurturing home. And by no means would I mean to disregard a biological mother who had to give up a child or a biological mother in any regards. But the hope is the chance for healing is in nurturing relationships. If you came into a nurturing adoptive home, surround yourself as best as you can with people you trust, people who are safe, people who are nurturing, and people who see you for your preciousness and your value and can encourage you and cheer you on.
Okay, excellent. Here's another question. She asked to remain anonymous. She says, what suggestions do you have for the fairly typical scenario where mom is the one pursuing the Empowered to Connect parent training and the trust-based relational intervention training, and she's the one self-educating and retraining, but dad is reluctant, resistant, or really shuts down when that old amygdala is firing away and the lids are flipping all over the place? How do you protect your marriage from being very detrimentally affected by that dynamic? how to preserve the connection between mom and dad. I was glad we got this question because I do think she's right that it certainly seems from my rather extensive experience with online communities that the moms are often the ones who are getting educated. And sometimes the dad is very accepting and is willing to be educated, but sometimes not so much. So suggestions on, I know you're not a marriage counselor, but you've seen this.
No.
You've seen this scenario as well. What would you suggest?
Yes. Well, I would suggest a few things. Those individuals who are the one that pursues training, the partner may become more and more resistant with more and more trying to bring education to them, right? So I'm going to go back to the basics. I would go back to this. I would go back to try to find nurturing time that is meaningful for you and your spouse. Try to take walks where you're doing bilateral, you're drawing on the brain bilaterally. And as you take walks, you are able to bring down your stress chemical and bring up some of the feel-good chemicals. Maybe try to de-stress the talks. Don't ever ambush. And I know that the parent, and usually the mom, as you say, Dawn, usually the mom who's really invested in surviving and having the family survive, because the weight of the harmed child is great. And you feel that intensity. It's going to be really important to double up on your self-care. It's going to be really important to do whatever you can that's about self-care with your husband. You know, I think a lot of husbands just give up, and maybe some were not as invested to begin with, which is tough when the wheels start to come off.
Exactly.
So I would say that when they see something work successfully and they see you start to be refreshed, that they may be more open. Here's what I can tell you about biology. For a mother, there's nothing more unnatural than to not be able to connect to your child and meet their needs. But our children, because they're fearful, push us away. It is the most unnatural thing for a mother. For a father, his biology, everything about him, he's built so different from this mother who's built for procreation or for mothering or for nurturing and for caring and for cradling children. All of her biology speaks to that. And all of his biology speaks to protecting the family. He's made different. His hormones are different. And in a home where there's a child from hard places that brings continual chaos, this daddy is disempowered. And all he can do is disengage.
Something that I see not infrequently is that all the energy and all the time from the mom is focused on the children, and that the dad has a very secondary role. And the one piece of advice that I could give people is the greatest gift you can give your child is a healthy relationship with your spouse. As you say, find some nurturing time. Make that a priority as opposed to the last thing that happens, because if it's the last thing, it won't happen.
That's right. That's absolutely right.
Yes. Great advice. All right. One of the things that we hear is that grandparents or extended family often don't understand the type of parenting we are doing. Perhaps it's not the type of parenting they did, so they feel challenged in that way. But they also just might think, and usually what we hear is that we are spoiling our kids or we're not doing it the correct way. And we received a couple of questions from people asking about how to handle that criticism, implied or direct, I guess, about your parenting style.
So I guess two things. Number one is the more information that they can have, I think probably the more cooperative they can be. Now, we haven't got materials written for grandparents at this moment, but we have creating a trauma-informed classroom that we wrote for teachers, and it is an article that talks about we have to give the children voice. We have to understand their trauma. We have to understand their history. I think that it might be a good introduction to grandparents. Unfortunately, many grandparents came from the if they're misbehaving, you didn't whip them enough era.
Fear the rod, spoil the child.
That's right. That's right. And I've had mothers who are adoptive or foster mothers who had a child misbehaving in the grocery store, and people in the grocery store would come up and I'll tell you what I'd do with that child if it was mine.
Mm-hmm.
And oh my goodness, buddy, you've not walked a single step in my shoes. Not a single step in my shoes. So I would say give them some information, but only a little, till they ask for more. So what I'm saying is don't take them over 7 books and 15 tapes and, some scientific research on why this works and the other doesn't. The parents are doing what they think is right. They're doing what was done to them. And I would say, I understand this is how you were raised. And I want you to know I love you and I respect you so much. But we've chosen a different path. And if you can't give me your support, can you please at least not criticize me?
Yeah. Talk about it subtle. Yeah. There would be hard pressed to say, no, I really am not going to be able to do that.
I really need to be negative Nelly to you.
Yeah.
And by the way, may I say this? If they stay with the grandparents when you're away, let's make sure that they know 3 things that you're doing. So, Mom, if he's sassy, I ask him to use his good words. We try to feed him regularly because their blood sugar, if it gets high or low, they're going to misbehave. So give them like 3 things. That's how we start, like with a school teacher, because my goodness, she's got 30 other children and she doesn't really have a time to read a dissertation on your child, right? But give her a little bit of material and maybe 3 things that you found that are really helpful.
Yeah, and the other thing is to specifically ask for their support.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes we aren't getting support, but we haven't specifically said it would mean the world to me if you would be on my team. Yeah,
yes, I think that's a fabulous way to approach a parent because they want to do for you. They want to be, most parents, even though we make lots of mistakes, we're trying to do the best we know to do.
Yes, yeah. And that includes our parents. It's funny, we tend to think of ourselves and we think we're trying to do what's best, but it's hard sometimes to extend that to realize that our parents are parents too, and they feel the same way, that they're really trying. I mean, there are exceptions, of course, but for the most part.
Of course there are, but typically a mama or a papa wants their child to be happy and their children's children to be happy.
I am loving this interview, so I hate to interrupt, but I wanted you to know about the Creating a Family newsletter. It is a monthly e-newsletter, free. We curate what we think are the best resources available that we have found that month. If you subscribe, you also will receive a guide. The guides differ. Right now, we are offering a guide to prenatal exposure, but there are other guides that you also may receive. You can sign up for the newsletter at creatingafamily.org/newsletter.
Here's a question from Julie. She said, I am interested in practical tools for encouraging attachment. Now, you've given quite a few, but I think she's looking for kind of a summary. So let's just hit some practical tools.
Okay. So the first way that a child knows they're safe with us is I meet their needs. I say yes. So when it is possible, put some trust in the trust bank. So when you make a withdrawal that's a no, you got something to pull on, right? Lots of eye contact, gentle touch. Now, some children are not ready to be touched yet. So we do a symbolic touch where I might touch 2 or 3 inches outside of his arm or touch under his chin, not touch his chin. And I'm going to try to draw that child's eyes to myself in the way that my newborn in arms would be looking up into my face. So I'm going to take that child's face. I'm going to be at their height. When I can, I'm going to get down, stoop down, kneel down to talk to them. If they're larger or older, I'd be able to stand at my height. But with a young child or a child who really trusts me, I could even touch their chin and say, oh, let me see those beautiful eyes. I'm going to learn to engage. I'll tell you a quick story. When I brought home my second child, now my first son had been super easy, but when my second son was born, all of a sudden my first son became a 2-year-old. I mean, he just was the classic 2.5-year-old. It was not fun. And I took him to the pediatrician. He said, you know what? There's nothing wrong with him. He's just got a new brother. And so I said to my 2.5-year-old, to your 4-month son, I know I'm not giving you as much attention as I used to be able to, because your brother needs attention now too. But if you will say to me, Mommy, I need attention, I will finish feeding your brother and put him in the swing, and you and I will play, and you can set the timer for 15 minutes. Now, I gave this little boy the timer. I showed him how to use it, and he was the play leader. This is the sure way to a child's heart. He was the play leader, and he would choose what we would do is always Tonka trucks. And I would sit across from him, legs crossed, however his legs were. I was the mirror image of him. And I would be the play follower, and I would follow him into play. And he would lead me, and I would play with him. And he was so deeply satisfied. Within just about 24 hours, 80% of the misbehavior stopped, because he had a voice, he had a way to get his needs met, and he knew that I would be present, body, soul, and spirit, for those 15 minutes. No putting a load in the laundry, no picking up my phone, no nothing but him. And give him as much power, or her as much power as you can. Let them set the timer. Show them how. They'll have to go, at least the old kind of timers that I've got, you go to the 30 and then you come back to the 15. And they know that you're letting them lead. They know that they have a voice. They know that they have power by telling you with good words. The voice. Another really, really powerful tool is if it's too much for you to sit right in front of them and mirror, sit beside them, rock them. Find time to do reading. Find time to do this little piggy. Find time to do games. The more you give eye contact, and learn to read the eyes. As I said a minute ago, a child who's afraid or who's on fight, flight, or freeze, for a little child or a non-pubertous girl, you can put your hand over their heart, and many parents are stunned at the heart rate, the speed of the heart. It's stuck there from 5 years ago before you brought them home. So make sure you know how much fear you're dealing with. Pupil dilation, constriction of the eyelids or dilation, shallow breathing, all of those signs. Be attentive. And a powerful question for any parent to ask any child, and this is what you would have asked with a tiny newborn. By your behaviors, baby, what do you need? You tell me as best as you can, and I'm going to get it. I like to say to the children, I'm a sure thing, buddy. Tell me what you need.
You say, I'm a sure thing? Is that what you just said?
I'm a sure thing. I'm a sure thing. Tell me what you need.
I'm a sure thing. Tell me what you need.
Yeah. And I will just say this with heartfelt sympathy or empathy for parents, because I fostered a lot of children. It's hard to realize they've been here with you for 3 years. How can they possibly still be afraid? Mm-hmm. But research shows that they still have the chemical cortisol after 5 years in a home in excessive amounts. They don't become unafraid unless we help them learn what safety is.
What is the research showing that if you're able to create a safe place, is there a period of time, kind of a rough rule of thumb, that safe parenting, safe place, engaged parents, at what point do we start seeing our children's fear responses improve?
I will tell you that when we do this with intensity, frequency, and duration, which, like our first place that we learned how to do what we now call TBRI, was a summer camp. And we had children come into camp. All of their cortisol was on average twice what it should have been. So we took a cortisol test the Wednesday before camp, the first Wednesday of camp. We saw behavioral magic happen about 5 days into camp. We were doing the physical activity every 2 hours with the hydration, the blood sugar, sensory. I mean, we were doing what you do with a newborn. And the next Wednesday, their cortisol had dropped into the normal range. It dropped exactly half, and it dropped exactly into the normal range. And with the drop, we saw language improvements, we saw behavior improvements, and we saw improvements in trauma symptoms. Matter of fact, we've recently published a couple of papers where we taught parents to do these strategies. And we actually had advances in behavior, which is not news to us, but we had dramatic reduction in trauma symptoms. Now, here's the trick, Dawn. I can get dramatic behavioral change by spending one-on-one, keeping that child by me in a very short period of time. We've changed neurochemistry with just the mother staying a yard away for a period of time during waking hours. We've changed cortisol in 10 days or less. But what you need to know is it will take, on average, 1 month to 1 year age for the child's brain to not have to depend on you to regulate, for him to develop synaptic connections of his own so he can do that by himself. I think the take-home message for all parents of children who've been harmed in any way or neglected in any way, traumatized in any way, is stay close, give voice, coach, mentor, and let that child know that there is no one in the world that's quite like you. When he looks into your eyes, he's got to see his preciousness.
Amen. That's a great place for us to stop. And if every child had that in their lives. And one quick thing, if you can send me some of that research, we have a research section on our site, and we summarize research. We try to be the bridge between the research community and the adoption professional and the adoptive parent community. There's such a disconnect.
Fabulous. Yeah,
it's interesting to me because there's great research going on, but it never makes it down to the social workers on the ground, caseworkers on the ground, and most important, to the parents. So we really are trying to change that. Thank you so much, Dr. Karyn Purvis, for being our guest today on Creating a Family.
Thank you.
I will link to the resources you've mentioned and the website empoweredtoconnect.org. Any other place you would suggest, or is that the place you want people to go to?
At ourchild.tcu.edu, you can find a lot of resources as well.
Okay, perfect. Say that one again so that people can hear it.
Child.tcu for Texas Christian University, .edu for education.
Thank you so much for joining us today, everyone, and I will see you next week.